All right, so welcome to another CASA Chat. Today we're going to talk about the relationship between our volunteers and our casework supervisors. Our volunteers are never just appointed to a case and told, okay, go advocate for this child. The whole way that CASA works is that every time a volunteer accepts a case, they are matched up with one of our casework supervisors. Those staff members are there and their whole role is to make sure that the volunteer feels supported and has all of the information they need to best support the case. So today we have on with us longtime CASA volunteer Ralph. Happy to have him on, and also his current casework supervisor Rob. So we're going to talk to both of you today about your experience working together kind of as a team. So welcome, Ralph. Can you tell us just a little bit about your time as a CASA volunteer, when you got started, and why you decided to get involved with this program?
Certainly. First of all, why I became a CASA advocate was simply I saw a sign over 306 talking about CASA and supporting children. And being a grandfather, that touched me. And so I wanted to see what I could do to get involved. So I looked up the website, immediately put my volunteer paperwork together, had my interview, and began my training. And I was sworn in on the morning of April 15th of 2010. That very afternoon, I received a call from Nicole, and I can't remember her last name, but she said, I have a case for you. Well, okay. I had my training and I felt pretty confident of what I was going to do, but it scared the life out of me because it was going to be a reality. And so I took the first case and I got involved, went to the hearings, and then it suddenly said, whoa, wait a minute, what do I do now? So I called Nicole and said, okay, I'm going to need a little help here. So it all began, and I can't tell you how important supervisors are, because I knew that I had the training and I had the basic fundamentals, but every case, I've had 8 cases, and every single case has been somewhat different. And without the support and knowledge and that which the supervisor brings, the advocate has a long road to hoe.
So taking a step back, when Nicole gave you that case, it was filled with information. Rob, as the supervisor, can you tell me what type of work have you done to prepare this case for a volunteer before it's handed to them?
So generally before a case is handed off to a volunteer, the supervisor is working on communicating with the parties to obtain information to be able to put together the initial case file, from the removal affidavit to contact information for attorneys, contact information for placements and children, different things like that, and compiling all of that information as well. And then what we do is we look at our available advocate pool as well as new advocates to see if there is a particular good fit, if we sense that there might be a really, an advocate that may be perfect for this case that we might have on reserve. Then we work on getting in contact with that advocate and communicating with them some of the general details of the case to see if they may be interested in that case. So there is a lot of groundwork that is done prior to the case being handed off to an advocate. Now that happens most of the time. Sometimes we get handed a case and we just don't have a lot of information, and we can't obtain a lot of information initially. And so there may be times when an advocate is handed an incomplete case file, and then the supervisor and advocate will talk about how we can work together to obtain that information to complete the case file.
So Ralph, you've been around for a couple of cases, so your relationship with your supervisor has kind of evolved. Can you talk about maybe when you first accepted your case to now, some of the things that you maybe utilized your supervisor for, but now you feel comfortable doing it on your own?
The initial, when I had my initial case, I think my relationship with the supervisor at that point in time was, okay, this is what I think I should do. Is this correct, or am I off base here? I remember from training that it's this way, but should I do it this way? And so I kind of bounced a lot of questions off of the supervisor initially. Now that I've been kind of around the world a couple times, it's a little bit different. Some of the things that I know I need to be doing, but there's always, like I mentioned earlier, each case has its own significance. And sometimes there are times when I'll come up with an issue or hit a roadblock, and then I'll go to Rob and say, okay, here's what I'm facing. Is this a correct way to do it? And I use Rob not as much as for his knowledge, but a good sounding board as well. He's a very good listener, and it gives me an opportunity, because the confidentiality of the statement or of the cases, I don't have any place else to go. So Rob, a lot of times gets to hear my cares and woes. And so together we talk through it and we make a final decision, and it's the best route for the children.
So Rob, Ralph comes to you. He's newly appointed to this case that you have just handed him. We've kind of heard what you have done on the back end, but to kind of highlight the importance of our volunteers, you as a supervisor, this is your full-time job, but how many volunteers do you have that you're supervising?
I currently have, I think, 23 active CASA volunteers. And then I also have, I think, about 3 or 4 that are waiting for cases as well. So we do have a significant amount of volunteers that we oversee on a multitude of different cases. And those advocates that are currently on cases, some of them also have multiple cases. So it can get pretty busy. If I could backtrack to what Ralph was just saying a second ago, kind of about the evolution of the relationship with a supervisor, I think with a seasoned volunteer like Ralph, who has been on many cases, is very smart, is very self-driven. Ralph has really, early on, I would say the supervisor would be the team captain, helping delegate what needs to be done, kind of coming up with to-do lists. But as Ralph has progressed through, and our advocates progress through more and more cases and gain that comfort, we encourage them to take over the team captain role in this case. And so that they know what needs to be done and they're getting it done. And then they are reaching out to the supervisor when they hit a roadblock, when they need help, or when they just need a sounding board. That has been, I think, one of the important pieces of the evolution of relationships with supervisors as advocates get more and more comfortable in their role, taking more and more of the leadership role and taking the reins of the case.
So the volunteer really becomes the point person on that case, and the supervisor is there really to support the volunteer whenever they need it. With about 23 cases, you could not be going out and getting all the information and making the connections as well as having these volunteers who are doing it. Can you tell me a little bit about what information you as the supervisor hope that the volunteers are getting from the case?
Yeah, so we are, we're required to have our monthly contacts with the children, with the placement, with the CPS caseworker, contact between the CASA advocate and supervisor. But then we also have additional information from other collateral sources that we need to obtain as well, such as speaking with therapists, speaking with the kids' schools or any medical providers, specialty medical providers that they may have. So working on obtaining any and all of that information, which is going to be vital for helping us complete our court report and submit that to the courts. That's additional information that I would hope that the advocate is out helping to obtain. Now, if they do have trouble, say getting medical notes or speaking with a school or different things like that, I strongly encourage our advocates to reach out to the supervisor, because the supervisor can kind of get in there and get a little bit louder and try and kind of put the thumb down a little harder to try and get us access to the information that we're legally entitled to.
And the supervisor's always there, correct, Ralph? Whenever you go to court, important meetings, you know that Rob will always be there in case there's questions that come up. I know there's certain policies that maybe CASA has to follow, and you as the volunteer are not responsible for keeping up with that. Your main responsibility is for keeping up with your case.
Yes, and that's absolutely correct. And I've always been extremely happy that Rob is by my side in court, because there might be something that comes up, then I can bounce it off of him before I make a fool of myself in front of the judge. But in most cases, I think we have a good working relationship, and Rob has always been there for me. And when I need that support, when I need that voice, he's there. And an advocate needs that. We try our best out in the field, but there are times when we hit that roadblock, as Rob mentioned, and there's been times when I've had to call upon him and say, look, I'm having difficulty obtaining this information or that information, or even gaining access to my child. And Rob has been there for me.
So I'll ask you each one last question. Rob, do you think that you could do your role as a supervisor and oversee 23 plus cases if it were not for your volunteers out there in the field?
Absolutely not. There's no way that we would be able to see all of our kids, be able to put the eyes on situations and help step in to help resolve situations in every one of our cases. If it was just sitting on one person's desk, it would be totally impossible to provide the kind of oversight that we want in our case to ensure that our kids are safe and that we're making the best decisions possible for their permanent outcome.
And Ralph, kind of same question to you. As a seasoned volunteer, or looking back on your initial time as a volunteer, we know that we put a lot on you and expect a lot out of our volunteers, but do you think that you could have stepped into this role if it wasn't for the support of your supervisors along the way?
Absolutely not. I mean, again, I go back to the training, and it was a fantastic training. You gained a lot of knowledge, but putting that knowledge to work takes a team effort, and that team is the supervisor and the advocate. Together we can do it, but without the supervisor, the advocate becomes like a lost child out in the wilderness. And I would hate to think that I would be out there saying, what do I do now? Without somebody to go to and say, here's what I want to do. Is this the right way to go? What do you think?
So Ralph, what would you tell someone who's considering becoming a CASA volunteer, but just hears court and child abuse and writing court reports and doing visits, and they have no background in that? What would you tell someone who's thinking about this, but those are their barriers?
this is the most enjoyable time of my life. I look forward to being a volunteer. I look forward to having the interaction with the children. It's unfortunate that we are faced with the current pandemic, that we don't have that opportunity to do face-to-face, because I love hugging children. And without that, it's very difficult. And I do the FaceTime and I do the phone calls, but it's just not the same.
Well,
So all I'm saying is, if you want a very good, very, very good feeling, and if you want to do something positive for children, become a CASA volunteer.
well, thank you. We definitely need more like you. So we appreciate you taking that step years ago and then sticking around now. And thank you for coming on today to hopefully alleviate that fear a little bit, that someone who thinks that they may be doing this alone, but also to let people know that you as the volunteer are the one who's out there making those connections, giving those hugs, getting to know those children. So hopefully people understand that you're supported, but you're definitely needed. So,
Yes.
all right. Well, thank you, Rob, and thank you, Ralph, so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Eloise. Good to see you, Ralph.
Good seeing you all.